This is Breaking Down Security, and I am Bryan Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Bryan and Miss Berlin for Berlining Down Security. I don't know.
Are we changing it now?
I guess we're gonna have to make the change permanent because
I don't know that I don't like the sound of that though.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I'm not a big fan.
Well, Mr. Betcher, he's late. He said, "Start without me. I will catch up." And I was like, "All right, fine." So he must have something going on at work or family issue or something. So our BrakeSec here, we care about family first. So we hope he'll join us in the very near future for the end of our interview. So, Miss Berlin, you were on another podcast this week.
I'm sorry.
No.
I keep doing this to you, breaking your heart every time.
No, it's
breaking your heart when I go on Bill's podcast.
No, it's fine.
Yeah,
no,
right.
No,
like I've never heard that before.
No, it's okay. No.
It's fine. I'm fine.
Yeah,
I'm fine. It's
right.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody says that to you, it ain't fine. No, I'm just kidding. No, so you actually went on Paul Security Weekly.
I did with Lee.
Man. Okay, so I've listened to Paul Security Weekly from episode 1 all the way up to fairly recently, and it was one of the first podcasts I ever listened to. So that's a big deal. Good, congratulations.
I was really super happy. They were great. They it was nice how they kept the questions flowing, because I was worried that it would be like weird, awkward silence, because we didn't really have like a list of things that we sent them to like talk about.
Does that normally happen for them? Do they get like a list of questions? And
I don't know. Like I've had that with other podcasts where they're like, oh well, here like we do. We have the show notes beforehand that everybody gets.
Right.
Or like, yeah, like when I did the O'Reilly one, like they had a list of things that we would talk about beforehand, and it was like with other interviews and stuff. I've had that. Yeah.
Well, we have a loose agenda. I mean, we don't have anything cut and dried. Yeah.
Right. But some of the questions they asked were pretty cool, and I like all the guys that are on there. So
it's a good solid.
It was a lot of fun.
You weren't the only person on there as well. Some weird Canuck guy named Lee Brotherson was on there as well.
He made it.
Groupie or something. I don't know. Yeah,
he follows me around like a little puppy. I don't know what it is.
Oh wow.
I hope he doesn't listen to this.
He won't listen to this. Mr. Betcher's not on, so he won't listen.
I'm gonna get so much shit if he hears that.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So I want to get started because our interview this week's in our green room, and he's stuck in the basement putting the lotion on his skin. Or he'll get the hose again.
We have a creepy green room.
It is a very creepy green room, but so he is a Seattleite like myself. I met him at a quarterly NCC Group meeting in August. He was one of the presenters there, and NCC Group does some really great stuff here in Seattle. They do a quarterly meeting where they get together, and we have speakers and such. And Michael De Libero, am I saying that right?
Yep.
All right. So he not only was his company the venue for the location, but he was also speaking at this event. So Michael, please thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Right on. So I was really intrigued about your topic. It was called Building an AppSec Team, and when I heard it, I was like, well, a lot of people, I mean, we don't have dedicated AppSec teams. We just have security people that just kind of do everything. And, network security, infrastructure, platform, product security, application security is just kind of, the additional layer of awful cake that, we're eating. That just came right off my head.
Awful cake?
The awful cake. Yeah. It's
fantastic.
It's just a big pile of shit. Anyway, so
you put a candle in it.
You put a candle in it, right? So why do companies need a dedicated AppSec team?
Well, I think it depends on the company, but it's helpful. I guess that's kind of like, why do they need dedicated developers and dedicated system administrators?
Right.
it's two different skills, in the sense that like with security, we have a bunch of other stuff, right? Infrastructure, product compliance, physical security,
Right.
and all those other things. And those are all different skill sets, even like IR, right? Like the IR skill set, vastly different than breaking, be that pen testing or whatnot. And so it's just a different skill set. And usually it involves being able to talk to developers and also managers of those developers to actually explain what's going on, why that needs to happen, instead of just like, hey, there's a really bad bug in library foo, you guys should patch that. That doesn't really tell them anything. So it's being able to talk to them. Now, that doesn't mean that AppSec people have to only do AppSec. I have plenty of people on my team that love to do network pen testing, and some of them kind of like IR for a little bit. So having a dedicated AppSec team is, even if it's one person, it's a good way to be able to talk to the people that are writing code. And more people are writing code these days. As they say, software is eating the world. So that, I guess, in the short of it, is why you need AppSec. So.
Okay.
A lot of times, do you think the developers are the AppSec team? Or they're trying to push them more to be?
To a degree, yes. Yes, to a degree, yes. But part of the problem, not with everybody or not with every company, right? But in my experience, devs want to do the right thing. They don't always know what the right thing is. And if we're trying to have them do security, performance, scalability, stand up their own infrastructure and do security correctly, and, whatever, keep up with the latest framework, that's a lot of stuff to ask them to do. And so to have them make sure that they know how to break something as well as build it is a really hard task. That's like, I always give a weird analogy of like, you can't, that's why we have proofreaders, right? Or editors. We can write our own stuff, but editing it is really tough. And also devs really like to build stuff. There's a different mindset breaking it down and destroying it. So you can get testers, I find, more easily to go into AppSec than devs. But
is that the gradient? It's like developers become testers who become security people, or do you find that testers actually become devs? Because I mean, the AppSec pipeline's got to come from somewhere. I mean, obviously the best AppSec person would be somebody who actually understands the code, understands the frameworks, and can speak intelligently to other developers. Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen different backgrounds for AppSec people. Some of the good ones that I've met have been really, really, really strong software developer engineers and SDETs. I've seen some good devs go into security, but they tend to get tired of the breaking and want to go back to building, which I don't blame them. And so sometimes you'll see those devs that are really into security end up being security developers, right? Where they'll write tools or like help integration or like go sit with a dev team and, like, oh, you need to implement Vault on your system. Let me get check-in rights on your code or whatever. And, go do that for them. Right. So they're being a dev, but they know security stuff. Whereas I've met some really, really good SDETs who've gone into security because AppSec, for the most part, is testing, right? Or, doing some of those kind of things.
Okay. So for people like myself, what is a DET? DET?
Oh, it's just developer, engineer, and test.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep, it's okay.
Okay. So your talk wasn't just about building an AppSec team. There was other portions you were talking about, management and business people trying to justify the existence of an AppSec team. Maybe we could go in a little bit about how you would go and talk to management people and get to justify that.
Yeah. So there's a few different ways you can approach it. One, if there's a compliance reason to have AppSec. That's always useful. But most of us don't have that luxury. There's also been other places that just give them blank checks. Yeah, we know security is important here. Just go hire as many people as you want. That's, small percentage of companies. The way I usually approach it is kind of a cost relation to the company, because most companies are driven by cost to some degree. So say we need to get certain amount tested, or if you say, oh, why do I even need testing? Well, if we have one or two bugs that are really bad and really public, it's going to cost the company whatever you want to throw out as a realistic figure. Like, oh, it might cost $100,000 per bug, but we want to be able to, if they question our mathematics on why we came up with $100,000, be able to actually demonstrate where that cost comes from, either reputation cost or the cost it takes for us to patch a bug, or the marketing costs, or all those things combined. So at that point, you can start to scale up at that and go, okay, cool. If we have 2 bad bugs this year, or historically we had 2 or 3 bad bugs that got publicly disclosed, or our site got defaced, that was like $300,000. Let me go hire one person, or if I'm not doing just AppSec, let me go hire some consultants to see what they find. Give me $300,000 to go check that out. And once you get that back, you can then start actually using more data and realistic stuff, being like, oh, based on what we found, here's how bad it actually is, right? And this is the risk that we pose, like that security or AppSec has coming to the table for the company. Now it's up to the executives to choose that, to fix it or not, right? You can't just be like, well, here's the risk, bye. Like, tell me, you got to go sit down and explain it to them. But in general, it comes down to how much do they want to spend versus how much do they want to eventually lose. And it might be that they go, $200,000 is nothing to us, and we'd rather, write that off and budget $200,000 loss than having an AppSec person in here. So
does the cost of the AppSec team depend on factors like what kind of framework you're using? Because if you're using like the latest, greatest, hottest, I don't know, Golang or whatever the hell they're calling it these days, whatever you young punks are doing, versus something like Java, which has been around forever, does the cost of that person's skill depend on the technology that you've implemented at your company?
I think it really depends on who you hire.
Oh, okay.
I have the expectation when I hire one for the people to be low ego, but also wanting to learn. So they even if they don't know Go, if they can show that they can learn it quickly, then I'm fine with it, right? I'd rather train somebody and give them new skills than have somebody come in right away that's perfect for the situation.
Right. Okay.
I like how you cover some of the actual business communication stuff in here too, because I think a lot of times that gets passed over.
Which slide
talking
is
to
that?
management and all that kind of stuff.
Which slide is that?
About timeline, 17.
17.
Talking to management, about how different people have different timelines, that kind of stuff.
Right. No, I do. That was one of the things that impressed me. It was like, okay, so, they think differently, and you're right. Managers are going to think more, strategic. Directors are thinking overall, longer term, 3 to 5 years. Even, individual contributors could, very, very much be day to day or week to week, depending. They're very reactive versus proactive, like a manager or director timelines would be. So that does make sense. This is an excellent presentation. So let me get back to the notes and see. Hiring. Okay, so you said low ego. How do you define that? Is it just, what kind of questions do you ask to find out if somebody has a low ego or if they're just BSing you?
That's a
So
tough
tell
one.
me about yourself.
Yeah, tell me
Yeah,
about
no.
yourself. I'm kind of a big deal on the internet. I have many leather-bound books.
So,
My office smells of rich
yeah,
mahogany.
how's your ego? No. Um, uh, I have a historically super low ego, slash I think really poorly of myself, hence my Twitter handle. And so I kind of compare them against me. I guess my benchmark. One, I also talk to people that might know them. AppSec's pretty small community, especially in Seattle. So more than a good chance that I might know one or two people that they know.
Yeah.
But let's see. There, I don't know. You kind of get a vibe from people. One, I might go find something that they say they know, and I might pull it up. Who knows? Maybe they say they know ASM, and I'm not a huge ASM person, but I can probably get somebody on my team that's way better than me at it, and I might be like, hey, go talk to them about this and see how they respond. Or I might see, like, I might either find a bug that they've found or find a language that they don't know and see how they handle being thrown into something that they really don't know. So if they're like obviously a native person who's always been working low level C, C++, ASM, here's some web code. Like, let's talk about that and see how you do. Yeah. Or, oh, you've been just in web dev for the last 5 years. Cool. Let's look at a buffer overflow and talk about that and see how they handle learning something that's completely out of their comfort zone.
So you throw a wrench in their works.
Yeah. And that will usually, because if they shut down or start trying to make excuses, it's probably a good chance that they probably have a higher ego than if they're just like, I don't know, that's kind of interesting to me. Let's talk about this and talk through it. The answer is not actually, oh, here's the actual answer. Here's how you write a buffer overflow. It's more like, oh, cool. I don't know anything about that. But can you help me walk through it? And like, we start talking through those situations. And I also try and make people uncomfortable. I'm pretty good at that. Sometimes not on purpose, but maybe if they seem very conservative, dropping an F-bomb or two to see how they react. Or, if they seem very straight-laced, going, hey, you want to go get a beer? See what happens. Obviously, if they don't drink, that could make us both really uncomfortable. Right. But security people tend to drink, so kind of assumptions. Either way, we'll just see what happens. Yeah, does that kind of?
No, that's great. So, as somebody who is has the lowest ego ever, you will never find anybody with a lower ego than myself. Or maybe Miss Berlin. She's So
yeah, I think horribly of myself all the time. So.
We could have a pity party right now.
Yeah,
we could.
That's right. Second chance prom right here. So you is it necessary for people who are interviewing for AppSec positions to actually know how to write code?
Yes and no. I don't.
Because, it would seem like if you're trying to find these vulnerabilities, there's an understanding of the code that's needed and being able to feel comfortable looking at code like this. So I would imagine they should at least have some kind of rudimentary GitHub or something available, right?
Yeah. It depends. Like, once again, it depends on the level that you're hiring onto. Senior people and even intermediate people, yes. They don't have to be the world's best dev. I don't expect that. Mm-hmm. But junior people or like interns, maybe they don't know how to write code. Let's get them in. I have had people on my team, or I do have people on my team that don't really know how to code, and we're working on building up that skill. So their level of testing, maybe not like as up to like where I want them to be in a few years' time, but that's fine. They're still finding bugs. And we can bring them up to speed. And I've also seen people who know how to write code and have failed in AppSec because we often make the assumption that if you know how to write code, you know how to do software development, which are
Right.
two different skills.
Okay. All right. Ms. Berlin, do you have any questions?
Not.
Because this is your show. This is your show, by the way.
I
But laying down
know.
security,
I
so,
feel like
you know.
I'm put on the spot now.
Yeah.
So how's that ego? No, I don't know.
All right. Well, we'll think of some. I've got. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go down to.
Yeah, I was reading through the slides and notes and everything.
Okay, so you've got here web apps versus more traditional apps. You're talking about how the release cycles differ, but with things like Agile and with most applications that I know of, you always have a web component in your application these days. So, how is having a web app versus a more traditional app? Make it different for an AppSec team.
But I think the threats can be different on both of them. Like take fuzzing, right? If we fuzz against an API, that interaction in your fuzzing is going to be very, very different than if you're fuzzing a traditional desktop app. Mm-hmm. The different types of bugs, different types of crashes that you're going to expect. Even the fuzzing instrumentation is going to be vastly different. Like instrumenting your API is way different than instrumenting function calls on a native application or one that parses file formats, right?
Yeah.
Because take a web app and say we're looking at something like Word, right? Fuzzing Word could be just throwing Word documents at it and seeing what bombs out and crashes, and then collecting that with the crash. And so, but if you do that with a web app, they're probably not fuzzing, or they're probably not parsing Word, hopefully, on the same web server that receives the Word document. And so you now have a whole different attack chain, right? Where you have to see how the file's saved. So that's a different type of fuzzing than actually how it's actually parsing it. Okay, so now we're going to break up our fuzzing into 2 or 3 different ways, and figuring out how to do that with the app teams is very, very different. So I think there's just different complexities on it, but release cycle, I mean, desktop apps kind of release a little slower these days than web apps, but there's a lot of overlap, but there's also a lot of different attacks, right? You take a web app, you're usually not opening up process.mon and seeing what's happening on the native system. If you have a native application, you're probably not using a browser to exercise the functionality.
Right.
Or writing scripts. Well, usually writing scripts, but
you're right. I mean, I was just thinking about it here. I'm like, I've never not worked at a place that didn't have some kind of web application front end. Everything has had a web front end with an application layer with a database. That's interesting. Okay, so is it becoming less of a thing where you've got your traditional apps versus your web apps? In your opinion, are you seeing and hearing of more web apps versus traditional, and is that something that people should be thinking about when they're doing, when they're interviewing for these jobs, to understand that the web apps are going to be more and more, and the traditional apps are less and less?
I don't know. If I had a crystal ball, I could give you the answer, but I do think, now that I've been in this industry way too long, cycles repeat itself. Most people now are forgetting about protocol handlers and named pipes and COM objects. More than likely somebody's going to come along in a few years and be like, hey, there's these things called protocol handlers. They do a bunch of really bad stuff. And the old folks will just be like, yes, go look at 2005.
Everything old is
so yes and no. I mean, even look at the app we're using right now for our podcast, Zoom, right? Like,
right.
It has a desktop component. It might have embedded browser in it, but it has a protocol handler. We click the link and it joins Zoom, and all of a sudden it goes, oh, you have your native application open. Let me launch it.
Yep.
Well, that's an attack vector. And like, who knows what that protocol handler does, and what it could potentially, cause problems with. So yes and no. It's always a pendulum, right? It goes back and forth between native and web apps all the time. So
okay.
And I feel like I've definitely seen more web apps over the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years than prior. I think it's just more common because people want the accessibility.
Yeah. Well, and there are like a lot of APIs and stuff like that, but there's also a lot of mobile apps, right? And mobile apps are kind of close to native apps, slightly different, but not too. And, and we'd say like mobile app testing is different than web app testing, because it is. So
for companies that have web apps and mobile apps in this case, do you believe that they're a little more mature because they are employing security personnel, or is that, because I mean, you wouldn't hire necessarily a security team for like a Word app. I know Microsoft has a security team, but let's say you're developing the next great word processor. Would your company go, yes, we probably need to get some security people in here versus, new e-commerce website, with brand new web app front end, and they're like, dang, we need to get security in here. It seems to me that the web app folks are a little more mature and more knowledgeable with regards to security because they've seen and heard breaches with, and web apps cause way more damage money-wise than your traditional Word application program. I mean, am I wrong in that thinking, in that line of thinking?
Well, we can send you some nice malware onto your Word, and you can tell me how you feel about that. But
okay, nope, that's absolutely true. Yes.
It's hard to know. I have noticed that a lot of the newer devs are ones that are in web app tend to understand security a little bit better. We'll bring it up and we'll be like, oh, XSS, da 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 da. I think the reason for that is one, those are talked about a little bit more, but also they're a lot more they're pretty easy to demonstrate. Right. Like, hey, you found this XSS. Oh, check this out. Go to this page, or like click on this link, and all of a sudden, bad stuff happens to you. Whereas most devs, even if they've been around for a while, have never seen, like a Word proof of concept bug that causes remote code execution, or anything else. Like, shouldn't pick on Word. Or an Outlook, or like a mail client, right? Like, most of them haven't seen a mail client crash and they get owned. Like, that's not that common because the skill to do that is a lot tougher.
Yeah. Okay.
And also going back to like the native versus web app stuff, I will say that there's a lot of native web app overlap in the sense that a lot of the bigger systems have processing backends that do a lot of stuff that a native app would. So you still need that level of testing or knowledge to dig in on that.
Okay. Going to add something here on the show notes. Miss Mandy, do you have any thoughts or questions so far?
Nope.
Okay. So, all right. So let's move on down the notes here. If you have an existing security team, how easily is it to augment into an AppSec team? I mean, how easy is it to shift that focus, or do you have to actually bring additional people in? I mean, does it depend on how many people you have in the team?
I think it depends on the people you have on the team and the skill set of that current team.
Because a lot of times you think security team as defense, not necessarily an internal offense.
Yeah, and some AppSec's also a lot of defense, but different than like, I wrote a firewall, right? Or set up a firewall.
Right.
I've seen a lot of security, or not a lot, but I've seen some security teams, right, where they'll be like, yeah, we brought in AppSec. We started to run Nexpo scanning or Qualys or something like that. And that was our AppSec scam, or that was our AppSec program. And, we hired in a consultant. Yeah. And if that's what they're good with for their risk profile, then cool. I've had other people who have had some background in doing like penetration testing, like web app level, and kind of tested it enough and was like, oh, this is really bad. I need to bring some people in, or people who've been around long enough to understand the value of AppSec. So they just bring them in. So it really depends. And it also, sometimes you'll get consultants that suggest, oh, you need AppSec people. But then that comes with the question of who's your first AppSec hire for the company, and if you don't know AppSec, how do you make sure that the AppSec person's a good AppSec person versus a good security person, which is another tough ball of wax.
Well, okay, let's discuss that. So you just said what makes him a good AppSec person. Is it he does pen testing, or red teaming, and he can show them these vulnerabilities, or is it just somebody who can go in and talk to developers about their code, or is it somebody who can advise them on, hey, our scanner has found cross-site scripting on your site. I've been able to actually take the example from the scanner, and here's what I've got. Oh yeah, by the way, here's Burp. Learn how to use Burp, and it'll help you guys so that I don't have to, come back here and keep telling you this. Is it an education role where, we just try to, give them guardrails instead of, trying to get in their way of development? Because I know a lot of developers are on a very tight schedule. They fail forward a lot, and the last thing they need is for you to go, well, your stuff's full of bugs and all that. So, what is like you said, what is a good first AppSec person if, or could you just, say, hey, Mr. Dev, you're in this particular barrel this week, and you're not going to be doing coding for the next 2 weeks?
It's a good way to get a dev to fire or quit. I think it's tough, right? So I would say the first AppSec person should be a more generalist person than anything. So they might not be like super elite person that can, like find all the bugs. Mm-hmm. But they should also be able to do testing, whatever that may be, code assisted or black box pen testing. But they should also be able to sit down with devs once those bugs were found and explain the problems. They might also need to go and give some education, do some presentations, sit down with testers or devs if they have a testing department, awesome, and work with them. And also potentially write some tools if they need to, or integrate with some tools like, oh, you guys, there's no way I can test 1,000 apps. Let's set up Qualys in an automated way so I can, test it regularly and get a feedback and, have a semi-low false positive rate based on, doing a baseline and then comparing the baseline with what the new results are, or something like that. So kind of spans everything, right? So yeah, it's tough. And yeah, sometimes devs don't want to fix the bugs, right? So you either got to figure out how to get them to do that, which is always fun, or, fix it yourself, which is not very scalable, but sometimes is useful, especially in the beginning, because it builds some goodwill, or people realize that like you're not just some person that's trying to tick some boxes.
Right. So Miss Amanda, she worked in MSSP before her current joint she's working at now, but and like me, I'm sure she's investigated a lot of third-party applications to help augment the process, or to be able to prove in many ways that there are vulnerabilities. How important are code analysis and, whether it be static or dynamic, to developers, and how should the teams leverage these things when they're using those? And are they worth the value even? Because
I used to be an automatic no on that. And So my opinion on it, it's changing more and more. I don't think it's a super great tool for devs in general because it tends to be way too noisy. However, I think it can be a very good kind of like an alarm system for the security team, where because there's just, you know, the usual setup is, you know, 2, 3, up to 10 AppSec people if you're lucky against a few hundred to a few thousand devs, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no way you're ever going to see all the code. But having something in there that can alert you on something that could be very problematic and have you go look at it more deeply with somebody skilled, then that could be useful. So yeah, it's kind of where my current belief is at. Ask me in 2 years, it might be different, but
okay.
Is there anything like major that you've seen that you think helped change your decision on that a little bit that you can think of? I mean, sometimes there's like a big, oh my gosh, now I might, you know, think a little bit different about this, but sometimes it's a gradual, you know, shift in ideas.
So it was a gradual shift over the last 2 years of trying to keep up with a company that doubled in size over 2 years and now has something like almost 1,000 devs, and me just being like, well, we're at 9 people. There's no way we can cover all this. And they continue to make the same issue. It would be really nice to have some automatic tool that just alerted me if they use something like unsafe HTML or, you know, whatever. So I could go find that issue because there's no way I can read all the code diffs. There's no way I could read all the check-ins.
So maybe like in a smaller, like 5-10 person shop, it might not be that big of a deal, but
yeah, I think as you scale, it's a good way to kind of do like a sniff test on the code. And that's kind of where I think bug bounties are going as well. Like I find bug bounties useful in a great way of like alerting me to code I should go audit or, you know, systemic issues across the whole organization.
But your bug bounty, you're talking about stuff that's already in production, right? So I mean, the proverbial horse is out of the barn, if you will. So that bug is already out there. So if somebody's found a way to do remote code exec, that's like a drop everything, fix it now kind of a deal, right?
Yeah, but usually it's not that bad, right? Like most of the people that do bug bounties aren't going to be finding RCEs. That's going to be a very small subset. It's usually going to be like, oh, rate limiting, oh, XSS, oh, I keep seeing reflected XSS across these 2 different code bases. Let me go talk with them to see why they keep doing that. Those types of things. So, and also with web apps nowadays, they release so often, even if it's once a day, compared to 10 years ago. I mean, that's really, really quick.
Right.
And so there's no way you can even keep up with that. So having, you know, something that alerts you, you might find it, you know, it might be in your email queue, but you might not look into it for 3 or 4 days. And then it's already out there in the wild anyways. So,
right. So so you said you have 1,000 developers, you've got 9 people in your shop. Has the role of the AppSec team for you guys become one of educating the developers against these things to kind of head a lot of this off?
We're going down that path. Like a lot of devs, and it might not be 1,000, it might be like 800, but whatever. It's a lot of devs compared to how many people we have.
It's still a lot of freaking devs.
You know, there's a subset of devs that are really interested in security. They might not know everything about it, but they actually want to know about it.
Sure.
And so, yeah, there is a chunk where we are educating people and we're talking to them. But at the same time, a great way to educate them is to find bugs and then do a write-up and publicize that internally so people can learn from other people's mistakes. Don't want to, shame the people who wrote the bugs, but you know, just be like, hey, here's this interesting issue. This is how we found it. And this is the problem. Here's some backstory on it. So then people can learn, because if you just tell people like, ooh, XSS, or, server-side request forgery, they might be like, that won't happen to me. But then if you show it in some issues, it hits home more. And so people start to understand it more. And then they also start to like find it interesting, and then they open up a communication with you. And so then you kind of build out those relationships. And so, yeah.
So you guys do like brown bags or something, or, watch this video that may or may not suck, or do you guys create your own training, for instance?
I would guess in a year, we'll probably create our own training. We do some, not brown bags, but there's, presentations that happen, and we just kind of insert ourselves into, we volunteer to do a presentation, like
Nice.
stuff like that. If we find a really bad bug, then, we'll send out an email about it. We're a globally distributed team, or a company. So if we did brown bags, it would only hit 1/22 of the offices. So it wouldn't help too much. So we had to figure out other ways to make it spread out across the world.
Mm-hmm. So you said you're spread out all over the world. Is your security team spread out all over the world too?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay. So your developers are spread out all over the world. Do you have, other than time zone issues, are there cultural issues with, the way that development is done in other countries that makes it complicated for your AppSec team to work?
Yes.
Without saying anything too
And
bad.
I don't mean
Yeah,
that in a
yeah.
negative way. I mean, it's like some cultures, it's like, you don't want to out somebody publicly because,
Yeah.
they'll lose face or.
So besides so each culture codes a little differently than every other one. They also communicate a lot differently. So that also adds another dynamic to it. So we have some offices in the Scandinavian countries, and those people are super direct to the point that I've had some communications with them, and I thought I was being a complete mean person, and they were like just okay with it because that's how they communicate.
Right.
So their code can also kind of reflect that, to where like in the US we tend to think we might be a little bit better than we are.
Just in general?
Like San Francisco people might, think a little better of themselves. And then in the Asian countries, they tend to, you tell them exactly they will produce exactly what you tell them that you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. I've come across that too. Very literal.
Yes, very literal. And so that tends to create code that's not as well thought out, and just, this is the code that will work for your situation. Here you go. And then they kind of add onto it. So that and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you're expecting when you go talk to them.
Yeah, but if you're a poor communicator,
yes.
and you're not expecting that, with other people, that communication style might work, but with them, you might have to. Yeah.
If you were like, oh, I found an XSS and alerts pop up, you might get a function back that just filters out the alert function.
Wow. Okay.
That's not what we wanted. That's what we asked for.
Your vulnerability scanner crashes our application. Here's the code to fix the vulnerability scanner. Okay, I get that. Okay.
Yeah. And then like in Europe, they spend a lot more time thinking, and they will not rush through it. And what you'll find is the code is pretty solid, but do not sometimes people will rush through it, right? Or will spend a lot of time, but their work days, they have a lot better work-life balance, quote unquote, than we might.
Right.
At 5 o'clock, they're usually done, which is perfectly fine. But it reflects in their code as well, to where it tends to be a little bit more thought out, and more yeah, you can tell they spend a little bit more time thinking about it.
Cool. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of people who may not work for multinational organizations, they may not think that not only do you have to have a good AppSec team, but you also have to know how to communicate what you're wanting to the developers and what you're going to expect to get back from them, or, they may not answer email at all because that may not be in their culture to answer emails in a timely manner. Or, if you're expecting an 11 o'clock meeting with them, they may not show up until 11:15 or, it's some people are very punctual, some are not. So, I mean, you really have to understand the team that you're working with in addition to your own AppSec team.
Yeah. A story I like to tell is I had one person on my team. He was working late over in Norway. It was like 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. And I was like, hey, stop working. And he thought I was firing him because I was like,
oh no,
stop working. But like Americans usually would be like, yeah, I know, stop working for the day.
Yeah.
But he thought I was firing him. And so I had to pedal back on that one. But I was like, yeah, no, I just meant like stop. It's late. Don't work so late.
Yeah.
So, but I mean that's that's an easy communication if you're from a different country.
Yeah. Do you find in communication standards that face to face is better than email for these things because you can get your point across better?
Yes, in general, I think at least building up some level of face-to-face rapport with people is super important.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Ms. Berlin, I think I'm almost out of questions. Do you have anything you'd like to add or anything you'd like to bring up?
No, that was all mine.
Okay. Mike, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So I was super impressed by this. Can we share your slides?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, and there's nothing in there that's specific to your organization or anything, because I'd love to share these out with people and give.
Nope, I made it just for that meeting. So
okay, excellent. So if somebody is, if somebody's building out an AppSec team, or they need help with that, or they have questions about AppSec in particular, is there somewhere that they can get a hold of you?
I mean, I guess you can use Twitter.
Wait a minute. You told me before the show you don't actually look at your
tweet a lot. I'm saying if somebody DMs me, I'll talk with them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, probably the best way. I don't know. I try and stay in the shadows as much as possible, but I'd love to
come to Seattle.
Yeah.
Come to Seattle and find the bearded person drinking lots of coffee. Good luck.
Oh, right. That's going to work out real well.
It's like InfoSec, man. It's like freaking. I mean, I walk into a like a CSEC East meetup, and I'm like, let me see who the InfoSec. There he is. There they are. Yep. Got a beard. Yep. So
they kind of look grumpy.
The only ones without man buns.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there's that. Or my email address. They can email me there too.
Okay. So on Twitter, you're No Skills, which is with a Z.
Yes.
NOSKILLZ.
Yep.
Can you share your email, or is that something you want them to find with OSINT?
I don't care. It's M as in Mike, EDELI, B as in boy, ERO @gmail.com.
Right on. Okay. I might be poking on you there for questions in the near future. So Ms. Berlin, if people wanted to get a hold of you, how would they go about doing so?
At our Slack, which we now have no more signup.team link.
I know, I'm sorry.
But you can tweet at us and we will send you the link for our Slack.
Yeah. It's not my fault. They turned the bot off.
I know it's not your fault.
They put the bot in retirement, so now I can't get the damn page to work. Everyone was like, "Oh yeah, I can sign up," but it's it doesn't trust the HTTPS, and I'm like,
we're gonna have to make our own custom URL or something.
Yeah, I need to find something for that. So
I have several URLs, but none that is good for.
Yeah.
That.
That's probably
our Twitter @InfoSister, INFOSYSTIR.
Cool. All right. So Mr. Betcher, if he were here, he would tell you that you can follow him on Twitter, at BetcherPwned. His last name is BoettCherPwned. That's his handle. He's also the lead developer and chief development officer. I don't know what he calls it. Yeah, over at oh crap.
Head honcho.
Yeah, he's really awesome over there at that company that he runs.
LogMD.
LogMD. Yes, thank you for saving me there.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I just completely drew a blank. I could see it, but I couldn't say it. Log-MD. And
that's right. He won't listen anyways.
Anyway, so yeah, you can follow him on at LogMD, log-MD on Twitter as well. So BreakSec podcast at BreakSec, BRAKESEC. You can follow me personally at Bryan Brake, BRYANBRAKE. And yeah, we have a Slack, and there's a link in the show notes to the Slack channel invite. It's a goo.gl link, because the actual link to the invite is like 3,000 characters long. So you can join us there on Slack. We have about 275 odd active users and 800 people total signed up. For some reason, they find it a lot useful. So yeah, we're we have a lot of tracks in there. We have OSINT tracks. We have one for PowerShell, one for Python, security architecture. Our malware one is going very well. Oh, speaking of malware, our class with Tyler Hudak's going really, really well. We've got about 20 people in there, so we'll be, the class is going every Monday, but it's a little late for everybody to sign up. So what we're going to do is put the videos out probably in mid-December so that other people can enjoy it. It's been a really great class, and I've learned quite a bit. So really great reverse engineering course teaching you all the basics about reverse engineering and unpacking malware. We're actually playing around with some malware right now. So, VMs are very helpful during that stuff. So we're on TuneIn Radio app. We're on iTunes, Google Play Store. I'm trying to get us on Spotify, so anybody who listens to the Spotifys will be able to get on there and listen to our stuff.
I did not know Spotify had podcasts.
Yes, apparently everybody's on it except us.
No.
So it was in beta like 3-4 months ago, and then they picked it up, and I just noticed it was a destination on our Libsyn account. So it takes a couple weeks to populate that. So it's a lot like iTunes, so in that respect. So yeah, so we'll tell you when we're on Spotify, and we'll send out a link for that. So finally, thanks to all of our Patreon people. Thank you for your support. If you found value talking to Michael tonight, feel free to leave something in the tip jar. Buck is awesome and helps support the show and, allows us to, do training and, maintain the podcast and the website. So there you go. All right. Well, Mike, are you going to be speaking anywhere? I never did ask. I know we got a bunch of stuff going on up here in the Pacific Northwest. Are you going to be speaking anywhere else?
Nope.
Well, that was emphatic. All right. No. Well, I'm looking for other speaking gigs. No, I'm just not. Nope.
Yeah. See my note about staying in the shadows for the most part.
Right. Right. Okay. So people turn the lights on, you scatter back underneath the refrigerator. Yeah. Okay.
I will talk if need be. It's not something I super ever aim to do.
Bryan paid you to come on here, didn't he?
No.
No.
Actually, he's got something to help me out with CSEC East. So yeah. But yeah, well, okay. Well, I mean, you were a really great speaker when you were there. So, I mean, definitely see if you can do something else. You can come back on our show and do some stuff if you want, or, hold some training. We got some training stuff. So
okay.
Love to have you on. So, all right. So that was it for Breaking Down Security. We may have something special next week, something that I don't think we've ever done before. We have some user generated audio from Germany.
What?
Yeah, JB, one of our slackers, went to a SANS course in Germany and managed to get
recorded the whole SANS course.
Gods, no. But he did manage to get audio, I think, with Heather Malik. I don't want to say her last name wrong. She's one of the mobile SANS instructors teaching about mobile testing and stuff. Mahalik, I think is her name. And other people. So I'm going to listen to the audio this week, and then we'll put it out next week. But he's got some really interesting audio from some of the SANS instructors. So we'll probably put that out next week. So,
awesome.
And then we'll probably be off for the Thanksgiving holiday. So.
Good idea.
That was it for Breaking Down Security. Like I said, have a great week. Be nice to one another, please. And we will talk to you again soon.
Bye.